Did you see what Carl did this afternoon?
I heard. I just heard from Dan.
Yeah.
Did he explain why?
He said he didn't have enough time.
Hmm.
So I'm wondering, do I get a refund on the money I said I was going to?
I would think you would.
I wonder what happened to the money.
Yeah.
What will happen to it?
He was here just a minute ago. Oh, he was. Tom Bettinger.
I can't imagine the time that people have to put in to do that. And he works full time.
Yeah. And he travels.
A lot. Yeah.
It's a big commitment to
Free on
do it.
I was talking to Lisa the other day, and she was going to be gone for 2 days this week, but she said it's great because then she has time to read the material for the council meeting, away from home. She doesn't have all the disturbances.
Yeah.
One more minute. Actually, we're on the air. We'll wait 1 minute.
Sad for us.
You're stuck with me.
Yeah, I'm so happy. That's good.
You can sit over here.
What did you say?
He can sit here.
Yeah. Guess we're ready. Welcome to the regular June 18th meeting of the Palm Springs Sustainability Commission. Dan, would you take the roll call, please?
Chair Clark,
Present.
Vice Chair McCann,
Present.
Commissioner Friedman,
Present.
Commissioner Futterman,
Present.
Commissioner Gauthier,
Present.
Commissioner Goins,
Present.
Commissioner Wilson,
Present.
Commissioners Santora, Miller, and Baker are excused, and Commissioner Flanagan will be late. We do have a quorum.
Thank you. The next item on the agenda is the acceptance of the agenda. It was emailed and posted last Thursday, June 13th, which is per city policy. Is there a motion to accept the agenda?
So moved.
Thank you, Greg. A second?
Second.
Thank you, Grant. Any discussion? All in favor of accepting the agenda, say aye. Aye. Opposed, say no. Unanimous. Thank you. Now we move on to city manager and staff comments.
All right, thank you. So just a few things to report out on. Unfortunately, I don't have any updates on the product development process or the branding discussion, although you should have all received an email from me about email addresses for from the city. So if you would like to move over to a city-based email address for your commission work, you are now able to do that. So all you have to do is log in, click on the Microsoft Office 365 link that's at the bottom of that email, log in. Each of your email addresses should have an ABM at the very end of your name. And a couple of them went out without that, but I think we corrected those ones that were errors. So I think it should be all set. If you have any technical difficulties, I think David had some challenges getting hooked up with his phone. But if you have any other technical challenges with it, let me know, and we'll request IT to support us on that. The only other thing I will mention about that is that we should probably decide, or you should tell us what email address you would like for us to use for communication. So that if you want to switch over to that address for all of your commission-related communication, we'll update our records for that and just use that email address. So you should let us know after this meeting which you would like to use. Jennifer, you look confused. No? Okay, any question? Okay, all right, cool. All right, so those all went out. Just a brief update on the recent council meeting agendas. Right after our last meeting, the timing of the trash cans draft ordinance went through for the first reading. I think I actually have to do something to make it get to the second reading. So I'm going to check on that, see if there's anything else I need to do to make that go forward. There was also the open space resolution that was included in the consent agenda items. So that resolution went from the commission and got onto the council's agenda for, with regard to their consent agenda, and so that passed without any discussion. On June 5th, the trash cans for downtown discussion was delayed, and so we took that back to the subcommittee, and I'll talk more about that when we get to that topic. The DCE discussion happened on June 5th, and the council approved unanimously to move forward with the Desert Community Energy green power option of 100% green power for the city ratepayers. There was a request to add a Salton Sea agenda item or resolution to the a future council meeting, and that actually appears on the next council agenda. So for tomorrow night, there is a resolution on the consent agenda for the Salton Sea kind of long-term solutions, bringing additional water in to the sea. And then finally on June 5th, the wind energy and zoning ordinance, and correct me if I'm wrong, David, that passed, right? They took the vote and passed.
It passed and is on second reading for tomorrow night.
That's what I thought. Okay, thank you. The other two items on for tomorrow night, which you'll want to tune in for, are the plastics ban discussion. So that was the resolution that this commission passed to suggest that the city develop an ordinance limiting single-use plastics in foodware, food service. So that will be on the agenda. There's been some interest by the local media about that topic. I did talk to them briefly today about that. So I imagine there will be a pretty good turnout tomorrow for that discussion. Also, Scooters Round 2 is on the agenda for tomorrow, mostly just briefing them on the RFI results, which I will talk about a little bit more later. Only other thing on my agenda was to mention the My Palm Springs app. If you have not downloaded that yet, please do so. I think there was a little bit of a glitch on the Android side for a day or two, so that is now up and running, and so that is available for download through either Google or through Apple. That is a new system, new application that the city is moving to capture issues with this that people may identify. Maintenance requests, things like that, so you can identify issues to report. There's leaf blowers is one of those issues that people can easily select when they go into select that choice. And then the other thing that we have just started to think about, I had a conversation with Commissioner Miller about this, is that eventually I think we may be looking to do more with that app in terms of recycling, communication about sustainability issues, all that kind of stuff. So I think it'll be a good tool for us to use down the road for lots of the issues and the ideas that we have and the work that we're doing as a commission. So that's it for staff comments.
Thank you, Patrick.
And we didn't get any update on the cogen from Stacy.
She's out of town. She'll try to
Okay.
make it next meeting.
All right, so we'll try to keep that update on the cogen plant on our radar. Okay.
There is an issue, an agenda item on tomorrow night's meeting on the cogen plant as well. So evidently, they're looking to get somebody to complete what was not done by the original contractor. So,
Is that the cooling systems?
yeah, regarding the cooling systems.
Okay. Okay, well, moving on then to public comments. This time is for the members of the public to address the Sustainability Commission on agenda items and items of general interest within the subject matter jurisdiction of the commission. The commission values your comments, but pursuant to the Brown Act, cannot take action on items not listed on the posted agenda. 3 minutes are assigned for each speaker. Is there any public comment? No. Okay. So then we'll move on. We have a special welcome, or perhaps farewell, in the next part of our agenda. Most of you know that tonight is Grant Wilson's last Sustainability Commission meeting.
See ya.
Grant has served on the commission for 6.5 years, I think for about 2 years as vice chairman. He's always had a passion for pedestrian safety and has worked hard at making streets more walkable. And his professional background at LSA Associates has been invaluable to the commission. So we thank you very much for your service, Grant. And now Patrick has a certificate to present to you.
On behalf of the city, I'm very pleased to present this to you in appreciation for all of your service to the commission and to the city. So,
Thank you very much. That's very kind of you. Thank you, everybody.
and we're excited that you're going to stay on the Walkability Commission committee for a while.
Of course.
And Greg has an announcement that we will have cake and...
Cake and ice cream to celebrate after the meeting.
It gets better.
Thank you, Grant.
That's just so Grant will stay for the entire meeting.
This is very nice. Thank you.
The next item on the agenda is the meeting minutes. They were emailed and posted last Thursday, June 13th, again, per city policy. Is there a motion to accept the minutes?
So moved.
Grant, second?
I'll second.
Jim, thank you. Any discussion on the minutes? Okay. All in favor of accepting the minutes, say aye. Aye. Opposed, say no. Okay. Unanimous acceptance of the minutes. Thank you. Now we move on to Gary and the recycling report.
Good evening. Sorry to see you go. I have enjoyed working with you. Just wondering what are you going to do with all your spare time. We've come up with a new report format, and we'd like to share it with you. So we have some slides here, and as we go through the slides, I'll walk through my responses as well. No, that's okay. Yeah, go ahead. Okay, we're ready. Okay, the first thing that I do is, for the city, is I respond to residents' complaints and inquiries. I'm just giving you a broad overview here. And I work with the franchise waste hauler, Palm Springs Disposal, and I have interactions and liaisons with other governmental agencies. For example, I spoke with Andrew Smith, who is our state representative, recently, and I specifically asked about any progress for SB 1383. That's the overarching legislation that we're expecting the guidelines later on this year. He said no specific progress has been made, and they're receiving a lot of pushback from the haulers and the recyclers, who evidently they didn't contact before they started writing this legislation. It was bureaucrats and attorneys and others like that. So they're receiving quite a bit of pushback on that front. And I don't know if Patrick will want to speak to this anymore, but we had the occasion, Patrick and I had the occasion to meet with the owner of Palm Springs Recycling. And it gives you a real ground view of what actually happens out there, the clientele that he deals with, the things that he has to overcome and deal with just to provide the service. He told us that he could shut down the Palm Springs recycling site and it wouldn't hurt him at all. He's doing it because he feels that he's providing a service for the residents in that area, a needed service, and I tend to agree. But what I took away from that is just what the people on the ground deal with as it's mandated from the state. And a lot of times, in my opinion, the state doesn't go out and ask the questions of the people that are actually doing the work. So I'll leave it at that. The next thing that I do is special events. We didn't have any this past month, but the special events would be your shredding events, the Health Run. 1 PS, the Picnic Family Fun Fest. You can read those. The third one is the preparation of the annual report, and that's opened yesterday, so we'll begin inputting the information. Now, this is the one that is where the city reports all the programs that it has underway, all the totals for the waste that and recycling that has been produced in the city, how many recycling centers we have, do we have any thrift shops. It asks you all kinds of questions. And I believe we have 83 programs that we report on annually to let the state know where we're at and any progress that has been made. The fourth one is, oops, let me get my paper here. Is tracking legislation, and there was no other legislation on the horizon other than what I reported for number one. The fifth one is attending meetings with city staff and Sustainability Commission members. I personally attended several of those, mostly due with the downtown recycling and the containers and things like that. So perform other duties as requested by the city. What we've been doing most recently is surveying the containers in the DeMuth Park, Sunrise, Ruth Hardy, and then some downtown. So that would satisfy number 6. Did we come up with the numbers, Daniel, for the monthly?
Yeah, it's at the end of this.
Okay, so we'll come back to that one. And the last thing that I have is what I'm doing in regards to enforcing legislation. And I was provided a list of 53 non-compliant commercial producers downtown, and I visited 12. Some have been polite, some have not been so polite. And I give them a copy of the letter citing the mandatory compliance ordinance law, and I also give them contact information for Palm Springs Disposal. What I do is I take down the information of what transpired during my meeting, and I forward that back to Chris Cunningham at Palm Springs Disposal, and it serves a couple of purposes. It fills out his spreadsheet, and also if the state comes back and wants to know what specific efforts we have taken, well, here's what we did. We visited these businesses personally, handed them this information, and I spoke with them on this date, and here was their response. So did you have the?
Were there any themes that came up as a result of your conversations with
They
them?
just, some were polite and some acted as if they weren't aware of it, and then others just didn't seem to care. They, you know, it really wasn't any great thing to them. One thing that I should mention last night, and it's not on the report, is Rob and I went out and we surveyed some of the downtown trash and recycling enclosures, and we went behind one specific row of buildings, and we saw 3 cardboard containers absolutely overflowing with cardboard. And I didn't think about it until this morning, but those are the same locations where we found the shoe boxes and things like that. So that tells me that they didn't have room to put them in the containers in back.
Yeah, just to clarify, they weren't the smaller containers, these were dumpsters.
Yeah, the 3-yard
Just packed full,
dumpsters
yeah.
absolutely overflowing,
Yeah.
as if they hadn't been emptied. I don't understand that. But that explains to me why some of the cardboard that we found out in the front and the trash containers was there, because there was evidently no room in the rear.
Just to quickly follow up on an earlier point you made that sort of related to that, I visited Palm Springs Recycling myself last week and spent a little bit of time observing what was going on there. And one thing was that one person had come in with an enormous amount of recyclable material, aluminum cans, bottles, and I can't remember the third category, but he was spending his time in there, actually himself self-separating these into the 3 different streams. So I did get to ask him at the end of this, where is this material coming from? Thinking that he was going to tell me, well, I'm collecting it from individual containers across the city. He said, no, I'm getting this from dumpsters. I was like, really? So why is so much recyclable material ending up in dumpsters? And that's all I know.
Yeah.
Interesting.
That's a good point.
Mhm.
Did you have the numbers?
So we will be reporting out to you guys on some numbers in the future. So this is an example of some of the information that we get, for example, from Palm Springs Disposal. They collect numbers monthly in terms of their recycling volumes, and they break it down into mixed residential, mixed commercial, green waste, construction and demolition debris, other kinds of things. So we're going to try to start to track these things on a more regular basis based on some of the information that they have, as well as the information that we collect from tons. It's all in tons, yeah. SA Recycling is a facility that's nearby that collects green waste and construction materials, so concrete and metal. And then the other one is Desert Recycling that also collects construction material primarily. So we get reports from them monthly. And then back to the conversation about Palm Springs Recycling, they used to give us reports, and so they're going to start sending us monthly reports again. So we will have that stream accounted for as well. So I think this whole process that we've been going through in terms of investigating where our waste is going and how it's being collected is bearing fruit in terms of getting a better picture and better handle on the quantities that are out there. There's another organization called Replanet that operates a facility behind Smoke Tree that we're also talking to about getting some information about their amounts as well. So hopefully we'll have a more robust picture and we'll be able to indicate some trend lines as we go forward here for the different streams and for our diversion rates, which we'll add in the future as well. So that's a plan. Don't want to inundate you with numbers, but we've got a lot of them we could share, but we'll try to identify some trends and paths. Yeah, John.
So to clarify on the 53 non-compliant locations that you went to today, PSDS notifies you of who they are?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, they supplied me with a list of 53, and so far I visited 12. I haven't visited 53.
And this was for organic food waste primarily?
No, this is for AB 341,
Okay.
mandatory commercial recycling. That's where, if you're a shop owner, you're required to have a recycling bin. Every business essentially is required to have a recycling bin.
So much simpler than the organics food waste for them?
Yes.
Right. Okay. That helps put things in perspective. My other question is, so there are all these other recycling agencies, SA, Desert Recycling, and you mentioned a third, Replanet. Primarily you work with PSDS. Do you liaise with these folks in sort of a more organized way, or what does that look like at this point?
Well, yes, I do. And I know the owners of both of those facilities. I've known them for years, and it's not a formal relationship by any means. I wouldn't say that because, sometimes I just drop by or I feel comfortable calling it. I don't know if I'm answering your question.
No, yeah, you are, definitely.
Okay.
And then,
And I'm sorry, Desert Recycling and SA Recycling send us monthly reports, so they have an official channel just to Dan.
the reason why I was asking is because PSDS is the municipal hauler.
Right.
So I don't know if we have any contracts with Desert Recycling or SA Recycling that would, where there would be sort of a contractual relationship that exists similarly. Okay.
No, there's no conflict there.
And so Replanet, PSDS doesn't pick up their material at all. Okay.
No, they're privately owned. They're the kiosk types that are behind. There's one behind Costco in Palm Desert. There's several throughout the valley, but they're the smaller. You show up, you dump out your 3 or 4 bags of bottles or cans or whatever. They weigh them and they pay you, and you go on your way. It's not a large commercial enterprise or a larger one, I should say, as is Palm Springs Recycling or others.
So then, I guess we should thank you for going above and beyond then, probably, because this sounds like it wouldn't necessarily be sort of directly contractually mandated necessarily, but, or I guess what is driving it? Is it that the state is mandating that we meet these goals, and so now you're reaching out to more than just our municipal hauler?
Well, this is is being driven largely by Patrick, and
Okay.
the way I see it is we're trying to tie up the loose ends. There's a lot of material that goes through Palm Springs Recycling. I was
Okay.
amazed at the amount of glass bottles that was there. That's a lot of weight, that's a lot of volume, and that's what predicates these reports. So if we can capture that just makes us look better. If we can capture our RE Planet or whatever the name of it is, that makes us look better. So my understanding is we're just tying up the loose ends and trying to make
Understand
it
the
more
streams.
tidy and more complete.
Okay, so that's
I don't know if
helpful.
that's,
And then I had one more question.
Sure.
And so there's been a shift recently from talking about recycling to reduction in general. And I don't know if the state has brought that up or if any of the haulers have talked about education in those spaces or if there's been in any other venue that you've been in those discussions. I'm wondering if that's sort of popped up on the radar.
Reduction in what respect?
Simply deciding to buy things that use less packaging, instead of being focused on recycling, be focused on reducing our actual, tonnage of waste.
Actually, that's the solution. If you got to the point where your packaging wasn't a concern, then recycling wouldn't be a concern.
But the state hasn't mentioned anything about that. There's been no shift in their focus or anything. Okay.
All right, I think that's it for the.
I had a question. I just wondered if, this may be in some of the data here, but I wonder if you've been seeing trends in the level of contamination in commercial recycling. I mean, I'm thinking in a lot of times for commercial facilities, they bag the recyclables to dispose of them, and the bags that are actually trash, not recyclable. So I just wondered if you had any observations or comments.
Well, I'll tell you that I spend a fair amount of time visiting businesses on just those kinds of issues because they have such a transient employee situation in many cases. You get new people in, they're not privy, or maybe they don't feel like breaking down the boxes for whatever reason, but you need to go and remind them, hey, I was just behind your building, both your bins are full, do you know that? Oh, yeah. So then I might even call Chris or Amron, another person that works at Palm Springs Disposal, and say, is there a reason that these bins haven't been emptied today? Because I want to give an answer to the shop owner. Right? It works both ways. So I don't know if that answers your question. Yeah. But as far as trends go, obviously it's more busy during the holidays because you get more packaging in and things like that. And obviously it drops off in the summer. But I haven't noticed, especially downtown, because it's a lot more congested. So I really haven't noticed any trends per se.
And one more set of numbers that we can add to this report in the future will be the batteries that are recycled.
Right.
Because Battery Solutions will give us a monthly report, I think, in pounds of batteries that they've received from us. So.
And this is all information that I'll be able to include in next year's annual report because you do it for the prior calendar year. So I'm working on 2018. So all these programs, the battery recycling and downtown and things, will be things that we'll be able to include in our annual report. And the state looks very favorably upon that, on things like that.
Thanks, Gary.
Okay.
Okay. Now we'll move on to old business. And the first item that we have is the leaf blower information campaign and compliance with the ban. Patrick?
All right, so the leaf blower information campaign, I feel like it's really important that we have props. So to date, we've received about 60 complaints since we started the enforcement process. There were about 10 citations issued. And about 15 or so false alarms, although I feel like that number is maybe an underrepresentation. So people are calling and they're going out there only to find out that the person has, in fact, an electric leaf blower. So some people are doing it based on sound. They think that the sound should have disappeared, which is not the case. And so we're going to try to post something to Nextdoor at least to show the difference between a gas-powered and electric-powered leaf blower so that they can visually recognize the difference and also just reinforce the idea that they are not silent. So that's what we've been finding so far. I think there have been a couple of cases where people are getting a little bit creative. So we got one report where a landscaper was using electric in the front yard and gas in the backs of people's yards. So anyway, so we're trying to stake that out and make sure that we get those folks that are doing those kinds of things. But for the most, I'm not going to the important thing, though, is that we have been receiving actually a lot of positive feedback as well. So from residents noticing a difference, as well as landscapers that like it better. So anyway, so we're hearing a lot of good feedback too. And now that we're into the heat, we expected a lot more negative feedback from the landscapers, but we're not quite getting that yet. So we'll see how that plays out during the summer. But again, so far so good in terms of people's compliance rates, I think. So So we'll keep you informed about how that's going. Any questions about leaf blowers? All right. The household battery recycling program is the next one. As you can see, everybody received at the table a little container for their batteries to collect at home. You put your batteries in there and then bring them into a collection station and empty them out in there, and then keep the box and use it for later. So we have all of the stations are now equipped with collection containers, collection tubes. There are 7 locations around the city. 3 of them already have been filled up once because people had stuff that they were storing and were just waiting to have somewhere to put it. So anyways, we have got 3 facilities that are pretty much full, and we collected 1 of them so far, I think. So we've got 2 more that we need to pick up. So anyway, so that's it seems to be going really, really well. Had a couple of people call and give us some good feedback on it. And so we are continuing to hand those collection boxes out at various locations. We were at 1PS last week and handed a bunch out. We've stationed, we've given about 50 or so to each of the collection locations to hand out to people as they come in. So anyway, so we have, I think, handed out close to 800, I would say, because we've still got a couple boxes left, which are about 200, I think. So quite a few are out there in the universe. So if anybody needs more for their neighborhood, just let us know. So and like Roy said, they're going to send us a report based on how much we send them, so we'll have a very good record of how much we're capturing. All right, any questions about batteries? All right, downtown trash recycling receptacle analysis. So as I mentioned at the beginning, the last council meeting, they deferred the discussion on the downtown trash receptacles so that the Sustainability Commission could work a little bit more on an analysis of those downtown trash cans. So as part of that, we convened a group of the subcommittee, and Joy from Crystal Fantasy, who also runs Main Street, what is it, Main Street?
Merchants Association.
Merchants Association.
Joy of life.
And she runs Joy of Life as well. So she has 2 shops. And she participated in the meeting, the first meeting with us. And so she gave us some of the history and gave us a little more perspective on what the shops are seeing. She is also, we're coordinating with her to go and meet with one of the entrepreneurial recyclers who walks the streets and collects up recycling materials from the trash cans on Thursday. So we might get a little more insight from him about what he does and when he does it. And then we also met with Heather McPherson, who runs the downtown maintenance crew. And so she met with us to talk to us about her challenges and her preferences in terms of containers and locations and all that good stuff. So anyway, so we're collecting lots of good information, and we will try to use all of that as well as the feedback that we're getting from our downtown trash audit to put together some recommendations for the council in July. So that's the plan.
And that's the July 24th meeting?
Yes, so it'll be on the late July meeting. And so hopefully we'll have some concrete recommendations for them, but if not, we can provide a report on where we are and what we're thinking at the moment. So again, that's what we'll see what happens. So,
Any questions on that for Patrick? Comments?
I would just add one comment. So one of the issues that we're facing directly here is all of the existing downtown trash containers. Most of them are concrete, brown. Most of them have been there for years, so they're very durable. And do we replace them with new, better containers, quote unquote, or do we use them and refurbish them and put signage on them and repaint them and do all that sort of good thing? Joy's recommendation was a strong one, that we keep these containers and we actually modify them, because otherwise we're just carting a bunch of concrete off for no reason. So it was good to get her feedback and suggestions on that dimension.
And Rob, Heather had similar feedback for us. So she was on board with that approach as well, and maybe thinking creatively about how we paint them, how we do the tops, although she said that a lot of the tops have been stolen, so we have to think about that as well.
I wonder how we can bolt them down or
Exactly.
something. Yeah.
So anyway, so she gave us some consistent feedback on that.
So I don't want to belabor this, but these surveys that we have been doing should help with this, because they've been telling us what kind of waste has been going into the different containers along the downtown street, and how full they are. And that should help us with making determinations, like if we want to pair up a couple of brown containers and make one of them a recycle, where should we do that? Well, that's the kind of stuff we're up to.
Right. So more to follow on that. We will probably bring something back to the commission next month, because the council would very much like for our formal feedback to them. We won't have time we'll have to prepare the staff report before our meeting, and so we'll report out on what the results were at the council meeting. So, yeah.
Yes, if we can prevail upon all of you, if we can get something to you, it won't be until very close to our meeting next month.
Yeah.
But if you can take a look at it and we can get some consensus from you, we need to get that information to City Council next month. JR essentially has given us a reprieve of 1 month to do this work, but it seems like he's very impatient to actually spend some money and get some containers down there.
And we can consider some options about how it's handled by the full commission as well. When we chose the containers for the parks about a year ago, most of you, I think you were all here, except for Jim, may recall that Joe requested of the commission to allow the subcommittee to make a decision about the containers that would be chosen for the park. So we didn't bring it back to the full commission for a vote. We chose them ourselves, but we had made several presentations prior to that showing the various options. So that's one thing we might think about, or we may think about doing just a consensus acceptance of what is recommended, acknowledging that you will have seen the selected or the recommended container before that. But as Patrick said, we're going to be kind of on a short fuse for getting the recommendation to the City Council, and a lot of work is being done in the month of reprieve that we got from JR. So.
Yeah. And I will say, I think both Heather and Joy and JR have expressed some, have observed that this conversation has been going on for a long time. So I think lots of people are looking for some resolution on this. So, all right.
Okay. So that finishes old business, and there's no new business listed in the agenda for tonight, so we'll move on to subcommittee and commissioner reports, the first one being the Standing Subcommittee on Solar and Green Building.
Okay, lots of things fresh off the press, or at least my cell phone, is confirmation that the solar zoning ordinance will be on the Planning Commission agenda for next Wednesday. That's the draft ordinance, just to make our solar zoning more friendly for getting solar up on the roofs as required by state legislation that goes into effect on January 1 of the coming year. So I will coordinate, as soon as the staff report is posted Thursday evening for next Wednesday's Planning Commission meeting, I'll coordinate public comment and relate to the Planning Commission that our commission had supported the ordinance. And hopefully, with council now meeting on the 10th and 24th of July, there's at least some small hope that we can get this through to council on first reading on the 10th and second on the 24th. But that's up to council after it goes through the Planning Commission. Hopefully it may come back to us, but hopefully that'll be in. As Patrick mentioned, council did vote at its last meeting in favor of launching DCE, most likely next fall because of billing issues for SCE. And with the 100% carbon-free option being the preferred product for Palm Springs, there'll need to be requested by council, a robust outreach activity by DCE that hopefully our commission will also be involved in. And as part of that, DCE at its board meeting yesterday created the new Community Advisory Committee with 5 residents from each of the 3 cities of Palm Springs, Palm Desert, and Cathedral City. And Commissioner Miller, Commissioner Baker, and I were 3 of the 5 people named to Palm Springs. So we'll be involved a lot in that. Next, as I previously mentioned, where we are starting to work on the Energy Code training session, probably the week of October 21st, and I'll be following up on the summer to coordinate the speakers in the program and hopefully get somebody from the Energy Commission to come down. At our committee meeting 2 weeks ago, we had a productive discussion with Jocelyn Kane of Coachella Valley Cannabis Alliance Network on sustainability commissions for the cannabis industry, and the long-term objective is to develop a sustainability package for the cannabis industry supply chain, and that would cover both energy and water consumption as well as a lot of waste reduction. So that's a long-term project. Probably we can put that on our objectives for FY 1920 to see if we can come up with something, and obviously the 2 committees of energy and waste reduction can work together with that. We are also starting to look on a potential energy audit pilot program. We'll do some research on that because there's a couple of model ordinances where people get energy audits. That may also be something that will coordinate with DCE because maybe there'll be some funding there. So I'll have to see what it is. And I know Commissioner Flanagan, you'll have some research, and I'll do some additional research on that. And then finally, we've got the electric vehicle charging program, which Commissioner Flanagan and Patrick are working on. So, and whether you want to provide an update on where you are on that.
So we've had a few conversations with our engineering department to identify some key locations in the city and identify potential power sources for those locations. We did learn about at our last meeting from a meeting with Southern California Edison and Stacy Schaefer and engineering that there is an SCE program to essentially supply power to 10 or more charging stations. So if we have a place that we want to put 10 or more charging stations, there is an opportunity that SCE will run the power to those charging stations. So we're going to plan to take advantage of that opportunity for the downtown garage, which is where we'll probably put the bulk of the chargers. And so if we could do that, we can actually save a lot of money, and so we might be able to buy more chargers. I did get a request this week from a visitor to Palm Springs to provide more level 3 chargers, so the fast chargers. So maybe we can look at adding 1 or 2 of those as well. So anyway, so lots going on, and I think that we will have be able to report that we've got some locations identified here in the near future. So, yeah.
Any other questions or comments on solar and green building? Okay. So we'll move on to waste reduction.
All right. So the committee met last month, and we've talked a little bit about some of the things that we've been working on. Just a note about the plastic foodware and plastic straw ban proposal. Again, it's going to be on the June 19th City Council meeting. We are expecting a lot of people to comment on that. So hopefully we'll get some good feedback to start informing that effort. We've already talked about battery recycling. And then we talked a little bit about the public spaces effort. We've kind of taken a little bit of a sidestep to address the downtown trash can issue, so we're working on the downtown spaces right now. We did order about 35 more recycling containers for the parks. So what we'll do next with that is to start thinking about where those containers go and how we can start repurposing some of those other containers that we've got down in the parks. And Rob, did you want to say anything about Lynn Yada, your interactions with her? Any updates on that?
Just that the Desert Learning Academy is a nice controlled environment for doing a more scientific study of waste behavior. It's a 300 student campus, but it's a virtual campus, so there's less than that are there every day. There's 8 trash containers. There are no recycle containers, so they're very interested in putting some in, and we're very interested in doing a systematic study of how that impacts the contamination levels in both the trash container and the recycles when we get them. And I think the one thing that excites me more than, we're getting data like this from the parks, because we do have some, for example, trash and recycle containers that are paired and some that aren't, and so I'm going to describe a little bit about that data in a second. It's open-ended. I mean, it's not a real scientific study, whereas here we could do that. We can pair them and we can get data, and then we can put signage up and we can get data on that. And then the final one is to put the students through a bit of an education program about what's recyclable and what isn't, and what the containers are to recycle and which ones are for trash. Get data on that to see if that reduces contamination even further, and then do a follow-up a few months later to see if a recency effect occurs and people's behavior kind of goes back to a worse level over time. So we could do all that if this institution would allow us to do it. I'm getting a little bit concerned because, as it says here, we have forwarded our proposal to the principal, and there's some money involved. They'd have to buy the containers and that sort of thing. And it's been a couple of weeks now, and I haven't heard back from her. So we will see if this works or not.
Right. Yeah.
Well, that might be a reason why I haven't heard back.
Well, I will say, though, that I think that the students are supposed to be, and maybe her, are supposed to be at the meeting tomorrow night, the council meeting, to comment on the straw and plastic ban. So then the other thing that we've been continuing to work on is this investigation into where our materials are going and how we communicate about them. So 2 things to report on that, just real quick. We visited a materials recovery facility last week and got some really good information about what they do there and how that situation is evolving. But more importantly, Commissioner Miller put together a survey that she distributed at the World Environment Day, as well as the last 1PS meeting, to get some feedback about what people's impressions are of the state of recycling. And so the gist of the feedback that we have gotten so far is that people are confused about what can and can't be recycled. Also confused about where to recycle things, and so some mentioned that they do not have containers available, or felt like in public spaces those containers weren't very visible. And then the biggest suggestion they had, or the most frequent or the most important place that they find information, is online, and so that tells us that we need to have more of an online presence with this information as well as we go forward. So, it's some good feedback that we're getting from that survey. We're going to have some more discussions at the committee level about where that goes next. But again, I think it just reinforces what we kind of already know, which is that people aren't quite sure what to do with the materials that they have right now. So. Rob.
Question on the MRF.
Yes.
Did they, or were they able to give you any information about the levels of contamination of the recycled materials that they're trying to process? In other words, how much that they bring in,
right,
are they having to send to landfill?
We did not get into any contamination rates or numbers. They did say that they talked to us a little bit about where the material goes, if it's residual, if they can't process it. But they didn't. I don't think they gave us any data on the numbers that they had. So, okay. All right, and I think that's all I had to report on that front. Did you want to say anything more about the other work?
Yeah, I just want to give you all one data point, that's all. So we have identified that there's approximately 10 to 12 paired trash and recycle containers across our parks, across all three of the major ones that we've been surveying. So I just did a quick analysis of the levels of contamination in the recycle and trash containers in those paired conditions, and I compared them to a situation where the recycle containers are not paired. And that I was able to just select 10 or 12 kind of random to compare. The preliminary data look interesting. The contamination rate was 67% for the trash containers that are not paired with a recycled container, and it dropped to 40% for the ones that were paired. 40% is still not very good. That's still a high contamination rate. But what it does tell us is, even though we haven't optimized these pairings, there's some indications on the recycled container because it's blue and it's got some signage, some labels, that it is recycled, but there's no indications at all for the trash containers that they're paired with that they are actually trash containers rather than something else. So it's not surprising that the contamination levels are at 40%, but on the other hand, clearly it's still having an impact to pair them up. So both of those are useful data for us.
Great. All right, that's it.
Thank you, Patrick. And Rob. Now we'll move on to Subcommittee on Walkability and Pedestrian Planning.
Shall I speak?
Feel free.
Or forever hold your peace.
So this past month, we've been working with Patrick on revising the scope of work for this particular effort. And Patrick, I think, really did the yeoman's work on that. But just to give you a little idea of what that entailed, the original scope was drafted in the engineering department, and I think it's safe to say it clearly had an engineering focus. So one of the things that we really want to make sure that is included as we move forward with walkability is that it's comprehensive, and so that we are looking at some zoning issues, overhang issues. It's also a safe routes to school plan, which was included, of course, and may have gotten us the grant. I'm not really sure. But just making sure that it's multifaceted. So we have taken that and shipped it back.
Right. Yeah, it's in the hands of the South, what is that? The Southern California Association of Governments, yes, SCAG. So it's back in their hands right now with our project manager there, and so the next step would be for them to issue the request for proposal so that we can get a consultant assigned to that project for us. And that will move along very rapidly once it gets assigned, because we don't actually have that much more time on that project. So.
And I will, before John chimes in, just add that we intentionally tried not to make it so broad from a planning perspective that the cost would exceed what types of bids we might get that fall within the grant budget. So.
Sorry. One technical question. In this context, overhangs refer to shading, or what kind of overhangs?
I was thinking of shading. That's
Shading.
something that we talked about way back when we were working on the Sustainability Master Plan. And also things like having a demonstration project along Baristo. That topic has come up again in social media very recently. So incorporating not just the public realm, but also how to address walkability in the private realm too.
Okay. And do we have any dates for when this will pop out of SCAG?
So they're looking at it right now. I think it should come out this month. I mean, I'm hoping that they can turn it around pretty quickly, because I don't know what else. They've gotten multiple ones that they're doing, so they should be able to get it out pretty quickly. I think it's pretty standard. And then 6 weeks probably turnaround time, 30 days to 6 weeks.
So another process question here. So this is a little different situation maybe for maybe some of the other work products that the commission has developed. And so I'm wondering if our current process covers how an RFI or, a grant-making process is distributed across committees and the full commission and whatnot. Does that make sense what I'm asking? So I guess when I hear, the way I'm understanding what is going to happen is that this grant is going to go out to RFI before having been presented to the full commission, I guess is what I think I'm hearing.
So, yeah, I mean, we could share the full scope with the commission if you want to see it.
We'd like to see it. I'd
Okay.
like to see it.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that would be good.
Sure. Okay.
Well,
Or do you want to see the final RFP once it's developed by SCAG?
I don't think we need to see the final RFP, but it would be nice if there will be no more work done on it before it goes out for RFP to see that. But we don't have to be involved in the RFP development.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Sure. So just the scope.
Yeah.
Sure. I'll sign that right.
and I believe the scope, was that not distributed to the commission previously? There was,
I think it had been, but
yeah, it's been a while, but
Yeah.
there was, the scope that was developed that was sent to SCAG for the original grant application, I thought was distributed, but it would certainly be nice for you to be able to see the revised scope. Yeah,
sure.
that went back to SCAG, and hopefully they approve.
Yeah, I'll ask them if they have it. He hasn't gotten it to it yet, so I'll ask him to send it back to me once he's changed it, if he has any changes. Okay.
And one more clarification, when Patrick says he, I don't remember for sure if we had clarified that there was a project manager at SCAG assigned to this effort. Yeah.
So,
And so SCAG will send out the RFP? Is that?
yeah, they
that's right?
manage that process, and then I think they said that we can sit in on the review panel or something like that. So I'll clarify that with them
Okay.
in
And
terms of
then
the selection.
They will make the selection, and then the consultant will be assigned to our project?
Yes.
Okay,
Yep.
thank you.
And then we manage it as a team with them, as well as anybody else within the city who has a stake in that, like our engineering department, I think would play a role in that kind of thing, so. Okay.
And then as the effort moves forward, then there is a citizens advisory committee.
Right.
That's created.
Yeah. It's a whole process. Okay. All right, and then the only other thing we were going to report on was the RFI results, request for information results from the scooter solicitation. So at the risk of stealing my own thunder for tomorrow night's council meeting, there were 3 respondents. We got a response from Bird, Skip, and Spin. The common themes were they're all emphasizing partnering with cities now as their kind of new approach to doing business. Lots of information sharing, and one of them even has an app that they can link to local businesses so they can route people to local businesses to promote more of the local economy. All of them engage some aspect of the local workforce, so they hire folks locally to maintain their units and charge things and all that. They have a lot of emphasis on bike infrastructure, so if something goes forward out of the council meeting tomorrow, then that's certainly a big thing that we'll have to look at in terms of whether or not we can accommodate these kinds of things. And the other takeaway that I had was there are no real technical solutions to all of the challenges that we identified, but technology seems to be improving rapidly, especially in terms of things like detection and location, and so that you can better specify where these things should go or not go. And the 2 of them have revenue sharing models, so there's a possibility to get some income based on their use. Based on the key concerns that the group identified, things like parking upright, a couple of them suggested locking scooters to bike racks. Bird has a fairly sophisticated tip notification technology that if they're tipped over, they get a notification that something's wrong, and so they can go out and address it. They do a lot with scooter design too. They have a very low center of gravity, so it prevents them from tipping over as much. Parking locations, all of them are moving, I think, towards more of a place-based parking system, so identifying areas to park them and only allowing people to park them in those areas. Helmets is another key challenge. Even though all of them give out helmets for free, they are looking at new technologies like foldable helmets and inflatable helmets. So to help actually to encourage people to actually use them, because these things are very mobile, so you need something that's also going to be mobile with you. Speed, they can automatically control the speed in different parts of the city if we wanted them to do that. 15 miles per hour is the typical speed, 8 miles per hour is the slower speed, and then they can go all the way down to 3 miles per hour or nothing. So a lot they can do automatically with that. Prohibiting use on sidewalks, they still can't do that technically. They still rely on people reporting bad behavior to address that issue. But again, the technology is getting better so that it is better enabling them to identify whether or not somebody is on a sidewalk. So responding to complaints, they all have about a 1 to 2 hour time frame for responding to complaints when they are notified of an issue. And then they had some things that they do with regard to tourist areas, so they can station people in tourist areas that have a lot of population, and so they can kind of station people there to monitor how people are using their equipment. And that was really about it. The only other kind of notable thing is that Bird suggested having some more accessible and adaptive vehicles in the fleet here to accommodate maybe less experienced riders, so 3-wheeled versions as opposed to 2. So anyway, so that's an option too. So we'll talk. We'll see what the feedback is tomorrow at the meeting and see where we go from there. I don't exactly know.
And I think at the 1 PS meeting last week, David Reddy said that there'll be a decision either to have a trial program partnering or not to allow them at all. So.
Right. Yeah, I think they had 3 options. One is to go forward, full steam ahead, the pilot option, and then not allow them at all. And so I think in most cases, all of the companies suggested doing a trial period anyway. So I think that would be the most logical step if they wanted to move forward.
So is council expected to choose one of those 3 options at tomorrow's meeting?
Unless they have other additional questions that we need to address. So.
Any other questions for Patrick? Go ahead.
I just have a comment. I'm sure our city legal team will be on top of this, but I just happened to read an article earlier today about, I won't name names, but one of these firms that was in hot water in San Francisco, and so they were verboten. And what they seemed to wind up doing is they bought out another scooter company that had a contract with the city of San Francisco to do a little workaround.
Right. Yeah, I think for the most part, all these business models are changing to being contract-based. So, so I think that's the wave of the future, certainly.
Thank you. Now we'll move on to ad hoc subcommittee on the film festival programs.
We haven't met yet with Megan and Tim from the Palm Springs Cultural Center, but I haven't even got to tell you this, but Megan said Tim really wants to look or speak with the people at UCR to see if they, initially they didn't really want to work with us, it seemed like, and so that's why we went to Palm Springs Cultural Center to see if we could collaborate with them. But Tim would like to see if they may want to do an east-west collaboration because he doesn't want to be in competition. So we'll find out about that and then go from there. So we'll report back as soon as we have a meeting.
There's just a note on the agenda that I don't think we'd had a sunset date for the end of the subcommittee, and we marked it down as the end of, as the end of this year.
Yes.
The next item is the ad hoc subcommittee on bicycle routes and cycling. Jim?
Well, we didn't have a subcommittee meeting. We had a couple of items that were open. One of them is I talked to the store manager at the Starbucks at Talk Eats about getting some bike racks there. She was enthusiastic about it, so we did some research and we found some smaller ones that weren't the big giant colored ones that we have, the bicycle shaped ones, but they're made by the same vendor, so we can order them in the exact same colors, which I think would appease any concerns that I think JR might have about getting matching racks. So I sent her some communications and pictures of that, and we're going to look into it. And also, I've been up in Portland the last couple of weeks, and I noticed all their bike racks are in brick streets. So I think they just remove the bricks and they set them in concrete and put the bricks back on. So I guess we need to work with somebody in engineering to kind of make sure that that's okay with them. Is there anything else on that, Daniel, that you saw? I don't think so.
I believe that's all, yeah.
Okay, so we'll see what they say, but I would like to get some more out there. Then I guess we talked a little bit about a safety brochure, and Patrick, I forgot what we talked about that at the last, a little bit. We had another group that wanted to work on some of the safety issues that had funding, and we were rewriting.
So PS Cares,
PS Cares, that's right.
and they are very interested in bike safety and wanted to move out with something in the fall, mostly related to helmets and vests. But I think that they would be very interested in making sure that maybe they have some input into the new bike map and safety rules and guidelines.
So is that continuing, or do I need to contact someone over there? I thought they were already working on something. I'll talk to you about it offline.
I think they're working with the same person that you would be working with, which is Vic.
Vic,
And
okay.
so.
Oh, that's right. That
yeah.
was it. Okay.
So I think what I would like to see is we should get the information together that we want to have in that on that map and in that brochure, so that we're ready to go whenever we get the new funding in place to make that happen.
Okay.
So.
Okay, that's it for me then.
Okay, thank you. The next is the World Environment Day Subcommittee. Jen?
We've had quite a lot of feedback that this was the best one ever, our 7th annual event. We estimate about 400 people attended through the 3 hours. 70 people helped produce the event. And Greg kindly was at the door, and we have this way of trying to collect data of how people heard about the event by placing jelly beans into jars that are labeled with how they heard about World Environment Day. And it sounds like a lot of the jelly beans were eaten and maybe didn't make it in. But of the 85 that did make it in there, word of mouth seems to be the best. So we don't know how people find out about it and then share that information. Facebook seems to be good if people are on Facebook. The billboards, 12%. So I was hoping to have a little conversation about the billboard, because what we reflected on is that there is an intrinsic value of having a presence across the community, that people are driving. We don't know who's going to catch the news if we're on the news, or what radio station we might get onto and who's listening at that specific time, but a lot of people are noticing billboards. So it's a way for us to have a presence, and even just getting yoursustainablecity.com out into people's vision is a way that they know about us. So they're giving us a deal of sorts. For each vinyl, we paid $945, and then they gave us the space for free. So there is this in-kind participation with Lamar, and they got their logo as well, once again, onto the billboard, as well as having it below it, which is fine. I haven't heard back. I asked Vanessa, because in the past I asked her, could we get on the electronic ones? And she said that no nonprofit gets on those. which is interesting. But maybe we could even consider having a couple or one or two vinyl ones and maybe paying for that electronic space or something like that. So that's one option. At our debrief for World Environment Day, Megan Goring also brought up that there is a company who will recycle the vinyls into bags, which is an interesting idea because then we could potentially sell those bags and, make back something from that. And she said they're very durable. She's purchased one. Vanessa had assured me that the vinyls are recycled from Lamar by a different company that goes in and recycles them. So it's not a total waste of creating something, to advertise for this event. So do any of you have any ideas or comments about the billboards?
I have a comment. I do think that they raise awareness of the Sustainability Commission and Palm Springs sustainability beyond just World Environment Day, and let people know that there is a World Environment Day, because most people know about Earth Day, but a lot don't know about World Environment Day. I think also it could be a way to get people to go to the app that you're talking about, especially in this next year, and get people used to going there, and then if they go there about that event, they're going to see all the other stuff that's on there. So I think there's a bigger bang for the buck than just the day's event.
Good feedback. I like that about the app too. That's good.
So I was wondering, is the plan to do World Environment Day in 2020? I know there was some discussion about Earth Day versus World Environment Day, but this model has been very successful. I think you've been doing it for 5 or 6 years now. So is the plan to do it one next year?
Hopefully.
Okay. Well, I mean,
We had some brief discussions about that, and I think one of the ideas that we threw out was to do a weekday event for Earth Day that was more educational, that kind of thing, and then keep the World Environment Day as more of the community event.
Yeah. I believe that's what we discussed at our last meeting last month too. So my thought actually was, right now this is an ad hoc subcommittee, but this feels like, it's becoming an important program for our commission, and maybe it should no longer be an ad hoc committee. Maybe it should be a standing committee, and we really put some time and effort into it because it seems like it's successful. So.
And one thing that came out at the meeting that we had to provide feedback is that we probably should start doing things earlier next year than we had the past few years, so that having a standing committee might facilitate that.
Yeah, I would agree, because it also gives us a chance with the tabling there to highlight the other programs of the commission beyond that day, so it's a good idea.
And just one additional comment, we were able to gather some waste survey feedback from those people, so, it's serving a lot of purposes, so it seems like a valuable activity.
Yes.
Well, this all sounds really good. I think having a standing committee for this is great, and maybe it's something we don't, I was hoping tonight to also talk about what our target group is, if it continues to be kids and families and adults, because it could change the event. We did have one of our exhibitors, she's got the smart education, it's robotics. So she's in STEM education, and she said, if we change this away from being a child-friendly event, she would no longer come. So I think that it is valuable to have something that's kid-friendly as well as educational for adults. And, we could also split it up and have, partially educational and kids and then partial, entertainment, because there seems to be this continuous feedback that the music is too loud and people can't hear, and, it's nice to have a little background music, but it's also nice maybe to have musicians that are, turn it into more of an adult friendly event. It was proposed maybe to have sustainable beer and wine and, you know, maybe turn it into something else like the after hour event or something. So, you know, there's a lot of possibilities that we could make it really fun and grow it into something that is really great for everyone. And, you know, so perhaps let's, you know, maybe, I don't know, do you have an idea? Should we keep talking about this and think about it rather than?
Seems like it would be an agenda development topic that potentially it might be a new business item if the commission wanted it, you know, if that was the decision.
I've been thinking about that as we've been talking, and I think it would make sense to have it as an agenda item next time, and we can address at least two things. One is who will be on the committee. Will it be the same people and perhaps more? And when should the committee start meeting on a regular basis? So if that's okay, why don't we just plan on discussing it the next time?
Sounds good.
We'll also have our new member then too, I think.
That's a good point.
And I will also possibly be able to report back with the art contest. You know, it changed from being a creek opportunity to an environmental education collaborative because I didn't want the art to not have. I didn't want it to be my art contest, basically. And so the EEC, you know, gladly wants to take this on, but I think because it has the EEC name on it, perhaps the EEC can sponsor, you know, the art prizes. I mean, it's not a bad thing to have community entities as well supporting it, but I would also like to see an essay contest and, you know, make it a little bit broader for other kinds of artists to participate and keep the critical thinking going in this environmental realm. So concluding, you know, we had a lot of support for this event, and we can continue to make this our annual signature community outreach event, which seems like you all are in support of. So, yeah.
Thank you, Jen. Any more comments? Okay. Then we'll move on to Ad hoc Subcommittee on Night Sky.
I did put together a subcommittee report that went out a little bit late. I was in Portland all week and my notes were here, but I did my best to say what happened. We met on the 29th. We met with Luke Zavala, from the chief scientist from the National Park Service, and from the head astronomer at Rancho Mirage. It's a full-time job, and we met at the observatory. And it was an interesting meeting. The Joshua Tree guy was super excited about it. He was just thrilled. It was the highlight of, and he brought all sorts of maps and star charts that Robert immediately absconded with because he was excited to see star charts. But
Damn it, they're sitting in the trunk of my car. I didn't know.
But you know, we sort of talked about a number of things, and one of the things that the Joshua Tree guy brought up, and Carl asked last time, you know, what's the economic impact of this? And the Joshua Tree guy brought up the fact that Joshua Tree's gone from 800,000 to 2 million people, and they're really pushing night skies. And he also says Joshua Tree generates $180 million in revenue for Coachella Valley. So he thinks a lot of that same kind of overflow with people, you know, are interested in dark skies, and that benefits Joshua Tree, as well as a lot of people stay in Palm Springs when they have that kind of issue. So we talked about that. We talked about some guidelines for minimizing light pollution, which they had a bunch of ideas. The guy from Rancho Mirage brought up a bunch of ideas about how reduced light can actually improve security, and he showed some, because a lot of people have security concerns about minimizing light, and switching from floods to spots and not overlighting areas actually make it easier to see people, which is helpful. We also agreed that this is something that CVAG might be interested in because this benefits a number of cities in Coachella Valley, and Rancho Mirage is certainly interested in partnering with us. So I listed some of our next steps, and I think we kind of talked about doing this in a two-part deal, and one of them is just to come up with social media and brochure type guidelines of what we would recommend as being helpful for dark skies, and then get that sort of out there and circulated before we go to the next step of putting together an ordinance. And real quickly, the things that we zoomed in on that were the most helpful were lighting curfews. So all the uplights and landscaping lighting that goes off should go off at 10 or 11 at night and not be ran all night long. Color selection, warm lights under 3,000 K are much better for dark skies than the cold blue lights, the 5,000 K lights. Maximum lumen levels by type. So a lot of times you'll see trees that are just have a nice glow to them. Other times they're like billboard quality lights. So I think getting some guidelines about that. And then that would vary by types of light and types of areas. I think a business district and a car dealership may have different requirements. And the interesting thing, we started talking about car dealership, is that when Rancho Mirage put the observatory in, they worked with, there's some very high-end car dealerships right near there. I think the Audi dealer and a couple other ones. And they managed to negotiate a situation that makes the car dealerships happy and the observatory is really happy too. So there are approaches that work in commercial districts that minimize dark skies. So, and the final one is shielding fixtures and using spotlights rather than floodlights. So I think that was helpful. And then another thing that I thought was helpful that the Joshua Tree guy brought up was that the city of Malibu just vetted and passed a whole brand new lighting ordinance that everybody really likes. And so I think the fact that it's already been through the city of Malibu is going to be fairly easy for us to sort of bring forth to our city council when we're at that step. And so I think they shared that with us. I either have it or I got access to it. I think I have a hard copy of it. And then, the Rancho Mirage guy says, I think he would be happy in promoting this with his city council so that Rancho Mirage, at a minimum, can partner with Palm Springs on it. But hopefully that would be expanded to Coachella Valley. So, Rob, are there any other things that I didn't add in there I left out?
I would just clarify one thing. When we're going back again to the challenge that was cast out at the last thing, well, what's in this for us? Why would we care about city council getting behind it, and why, beyond just the general night skies are good, and Jim mentioned so the first point that he really emphasized was how many people come to Joshua Tree because it's a dark sky destination. Large proportion of the millions that go there. The second point he made was we're overcrowded and we're overwhelmed. So we can't handle the number of people that want to go to Joshua Tree. So the third point was if we could recover our dark skies here in Palm Springs and start advertising ourselves as a dark sky destination, then we could take Joshua Tree's overflow and it would be a total win-win situation. I thought that was pretty powerful.
And he actually added a tagline to that too, which I thought was really great promotional piece. It just said, the Milky Way is only 2 hours away.
Yeah.
You kind of think about it. But
It'd be nice to be advertising that in LA for us.
Anyway, so I see as the next steps, I don't have any contacts at CVAG, I don't know how that works, but we're going to develop our internal brochure, our internal list, and kind of polish it up a little bit, circulate it with Rancho Mirage, and then maybe somehow present it at CVAG. Can I do that?
Yeah, we have lots of connections there,
Yeah,
so we'll
okay,
figure
well, I'll
out
work
how
with you
to
on
work
that.
it in there.
And then once that kind of gets out the door, maybe after summer, then we can start digging up Malibu's ordinances and see how amenable that is to working with our city council. So that's it.
This poster that, and I'll definitely try to, I will remember to bring it for our next meeting. They've done a visual of where light pollution is up at Joshua Tree, and it's down at the horizon. It's okay up above, but there's an area that's Las Vegas. There's an area that's LA and the Basin, but unfortunately, then there's an area to the south, which is us, which is the Coachella Valley. So we're part of the problem now, not the solution.
So you'll be continuing to meet then?
Question, John?
Did any of the ordinances deal with events? I know that here in the city manager can override a noise ordinance if there's a specific reason to. So I don't know if, we do have some events that have really bright lights and, do deserve some consideration. So I'm wondering if that's been dealt with in any ordinances you've
I
seen.
haven't read through it all, but I would imagine they do recreation sports facilities. There tends to be guidelines about those sort of things. So, I think it's the sum total of the game. If you eliminate, some car lots and some parks, and occasionally you'll have some overflows. But I haven't combed through the Malibu ordinance in detail. Something to keep aware of. I'll take a look next time.
And John, I'm not aware of any either, but I live in Sunrise Park. I am a block and a half from all of the fields at Palm Springs High School, and there is serious light pollution from those fields. And I don't know at this point whether the lights are on when they don't have to be. But it would be something nice to explore and find out, because if those fields are being illuminated when there aren't events going on, or after the events are finished for too long, it's just wasting taxpayer money, and it's wasting school money, and it's polluting my my night skies.
Grant?
Thank you. That was very thorough and informative. And I just wanted to address the applicability of light pollution and regulation of it to walkability, because as we discovered on our survey, which we did in the winter when it got dark pretty early, there are areas where there are, as a pedestrian, it's very difficult to find your way, in part because either there's no lighting at all, or because the lighting is lighting the street, and the lighting that is lighting the street is casting out and not, it's generally downward, but it's just casting out, but it's not lighting the way for those who really need the light. So that's definitely one of the things that we had taken into consideration, and we would like to see included in the walkability plan too. Thanks.
Great, thank you. So moving on to bighorn sheep habitat protection.
That's
Jim?
me again too. Yeah, this one's not as good. So, most of I've had a couple meetings with Jane Garrison, who's been working on this, but it was just informal, and they really track the number of sheep. And there's been some articles in the Desert Sun recently, and apparently the lambing season in San Jacinto didn't go very well, and there were only 4, and they seem to believe the 4 lambs are either dead or gone. So it's an unfortunate situation, but interestingly enough, if you look at that's in San Jacinto Mountains. So if you look at Santa Rosa Mountains, the breeding was successful and they haven't lost anything. So something is different between these 2 ranges. We continue to try and work with the city manager. We're not getting any traction at all. June 3rd, we both had a long discussion with Lisa Middleton. She said she'd bring it forward. And I responded back in kind saying that, in a follow-up with Lisa, and I said, we're not getting much traction here. The next step that we're discussing with Bighorn Sheep's thinking about, since these parks are BLM National Park, is closing the trails entirely. So that would be closing all the lichen trails, all trail access in Palm Springs. I think as hopefully that'll get their attention a little bit more than just putting the dog signs up, because that's obviously up to the BLM, but I think that would be something worth considering if it preserves a species that's hanging by a thread right now. So anyway, we'll see what Lisa has to say, and I don't think it came up in the meeting, so I think we're going to move to our next step. So that's it.
Any comments or questions? The next item is wellness, and Commissioner Baker is not here tonight. Water.
Okay, so there was a presentation this morning at the DWA board meeting on its rebate program for the new fiscal year that begins on July 1. As I mentioned last month, the residential rebate will go from $1 per square foot to $2 per square foot to replace some state money that will no longer be available in the new fiscal year, and rebates will be available in private areas, i.e. backyards. There'll be a residential $500 professional design rebate, so you can basically hire a landscape person and get $500 back on that. And a new program will be a $150 rebate for high-efficiency washing machines, which probably cost about $200 more than just the regular unit, so most of that additional cost will be covered by the rebate. And there will also be a commercial toilet rebate program that's targeted to hotels. So for 10 toilets or more, the residential toilet program is being phased out. And finally, a low-income repair program of up to $750 per property to repair plumbing or irrigation, where DWA will basically work and send somebody over and pay the bill for that. So the program rollout is scheduled for August 30th for the new fiscal year. It'll be helpful. I know Patrick is coordinating a lot with Ashley so that we can perhaps, post a link to make sure that people are directed to the DWA website, and they'll be holding a webinar workshop around that time about the new programs. As also I mentioned last month, there's continuing work with Patrick on a demonstration project at the airport, essentially right across the street. And Ashley seemed to think that while they were requesting Prop 1 funds of $60,000, that they're going to do it anyway. She seemed pretty optimistic that this was actually something that's likely to happen, so we can coordinate on that. You can bring that back to us.
So the only addition I have to that is that the landscape committee of the airport commission met and passed a resolution to essentially spend, I think they set aside about $150,000 on a design plan, so for turf conversion. So what they wanted to do was have a plan in place so that they could essentially do projects as the money was available. So that passed, and I think it passed the full commission as well. So I think that's another good sign.
Okay. Because this has been literally years of discussion. When the drought first hit in 2014, the first reaction of most people was, why is all this grass out at the airport and the fountain and things like that? So it'd be great to see some progress there. And last, with the slightly cooler weather, last month there was a 22.6% reduction in potable water production compared with the same month in 2013. Cumulative savings over the last 12-month period is 17.8%. And cumulative savings in the last 3 years, when DWA put its 10 to 13% target in place, is 17.7%, so we're way above the target savings. So, so far this year, less water was consumed than in each month in 2018. So we're definitely on a good trend on water, and it seems to be that the residential, a lot of people who wanted to do the residential has been done, so they're working, hopefully we can work with that on some of the HOAs and perhaps come up with some funds to support some of the HOAs and other commercial areas, because the residential is probably mostly done. They seem to think that that's at least the front yards are done, maybe get some more backyards and things like that. So the good news is that people are conserving.
Thank you. And outreach, is there anything separate on outreach, Jen?
Nothing separate, just
Okay.
trying to promote the last of our sustainable film series and World Environment Day.
Okay, thank you. Okay, the final item on the agenda is to go around the table and have commissioner comments and upcoming agenda development. So we'll start here with Jim.
I don't have any, for me specifically, I know we talked a little bit about light driveway, or light street coatings. Like the street coatings that were light gray instead of black. I don't know if that's a sustainability thing or that was just a question.
You did mention it, but there, yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
All I-
We'll add it to our parking lot.
Okay.
Yes. We keep a parking lot in the document where we develop the agenda for each month, and there are several topics there that,
Perfect place to keep the
Yes.
parking lot coding discussion in the parking lot.
yes, no pun intended.
And that's just to keep things cooler, obviously,
Right.
the light colors.
Okay. Grant, anything you'd like to say to us?
Well, yeah, of course, because I'm leaving. I'm going to go around.
Don't forget to thank the Academy.
Yeah, there's no orchestra to get the hook and take me off the stage. So, so Commissioner Friedman, I want to thank you for working on solar with me in the beginning, and when I ran away and started focusing on mobility issues, I am utterly amazed at how far you took that and other energy issues, and I can't thank you enough for the entire city for everything that you've done.
Thank you.
Sure. And Commissioner, not Gautier, but Gauthier, thank you for working with me on walkability, and it's always been a pleasure just getting together with you and trying to move things forward, and I look forward to continuing to work with you on that. Commissioner Goins, thank you for your work on the commission, on the subcommittees that you do, and I just want to point out that I think that your comments and questions are always very thought-provoking, and I think that ramps up our game, and I thank you for that. Commissioner Futterman, thank you for also joining our Walkability Committee, and I am very impressed with your film work, but I see World Environment Day is really taking off, and I love that. And I'm sorry that we weren't able to participate on that this year. Hopefully our schedules at my office allow us to do that next year. Commissioner McCann, thank you for dealing with waste and pre-waste and post-waste and everything associated with it, and taking on the role of vice chair. And Chair Clark, thank you for taking on the role of vice chair when I was feeling a little bit of pressure to do that, but my workload was not allowing me, and I think you've done a bang-up job in that role, and then as chair as well. So keep at it. Thank you. Commissioner Flanagan, it was great meeting you even before you were assigned to this commission. And it's just the diversity and array of topics that you're covering is great. And thanks, keep it up. And Manager Tallarico, I look forward to continuing to work with you on walkability as that topic moves forward, and you've really hit the ground running, and very impressed. Oh, Coordinator DeGarbo. Thank you for keeping us very well organized and keeping a level head through all of it and all of the work that you do. It's been a real pleasure and an honor working with you, so thank you very much.
Working with you, enjoyed it.
Thanks. And I'll have to find a place in my office very prominent for my certificate. Thank you for doing that. That's very nice.
You can keep your name tag plate too.
Thank you, Grant. David?
Nothing further, and once again, it's other than to say it's been a pleasure working with Commissioner Wilson. I think I inherit the title of being the longest-serving commissioner, so I'm happy to be the sort of the historical reference. There's a lot of things that we have been talking about. It does seem that things sort of hit the agenda saying, oh, didn't we already talk about that like 4 years ago? So I'm happy to be the recipient of the baton passing. Thank you very much, Commissioner Wilson.
Great.
In the interest of getting to the cake as soon as possible, I'll hold any comments.
John?
Sorry for keeping you away from the cake. I have one small thing. I just wanted to comment on one out of committee or subcommittee activity that happened during the past month, and that was T. Santora, Patrick, and I met with Lisa Bodnar at CVEP to get a jump start on the economic sustainability chapter of our sustainability master plan, which we haven't been working on, and so I think we covered a lot of ground. We came out of the meeting with some next steps, so I may, until we make a formal motion, just keep talking about those items here, if that's appropriate.
You considering at all forming a standing subcommittee?
We're exploring. There are a lot of things that we can do. Some of them are really large, and some of them are maybe, we still have to find resources to figure out how to cover some others. Mm-hmm. So, if either one of those challenges can be tackled, then certainly. But I think we want to be sure that we can do that before we actually form a subcommittee.
Okay. So perhaps we'll keep the subcommittee in the parking lot for
Yeah,
now.
yeah.
Jen?
I have two things. So we have a presentation for next meeting about the fountain grass. So we have a couple of presenters that will educate us, and also about some native options.
So that'll be a special presentation?
Yes.
Okay, great.
And in speaking with Megan Goring from the Palm Springs Cultural Center, she let me know that they are in need of about 6 recycling containers. They would not need to be super durable because they're inside, but the cardboard ones that are presently there are, not a great option. And so she inquired if we might be able to help them acquire these. And I thought it could be a really nice partnership if we could purchase these recycling containers and put our logo on it. It would get Your Sustainable City out there even more. And they're a nonprofit, so it seems, they do a lot of good work in our community.
Just one thought on that, and Rob may have something to say, is it might be worth talking to her a little bit more to find out what types of materials they do generate and what would be recycled. That might drive the container design as well. That's kind of the pattern that we've been falling into when we've been doing the surveys in the parks and downtown, just what is recycled. So
Sure, that sounds like a great idea.
we can keep that in mind with our subcommittee. Rob?
Nothing further. Cake is sounding good.
Okay. So if there are no more comments, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Grant, second? Greg? Meeting adjourned.